No bugs at all, no bugs at all. Use Hargate insecticide, have no bugs at all. It's a natural ingredient, a mixture you see. No kerosene or the no DDT. If it crawls or it flies, very quickly it dies. Use Hargate insecticide, have no bugs at all. We start our Kook's tour of New York in Greenwich Village with a visit to the Tepid Temple, a typical coffee shop where congregate the conflicting contenders in the current camp Kulturkampf. You know right away this is not a tourist place because you see vacant Weltschmerzy people wandering around like Bubbles and Borscht, and you catch bits of real intellectual talk about the middle-class morality and the bourgeoisie, the black bourgeoisie, the white power structure, the competitive, aggressive American women and the father image and the mothers. Oh yes, I must tell you about the mother bit. This got me into a little trouble. You see, originally I went to another place, a competitor across the street called the Hot Pot. Well, there it was the same thing, the people wandering around, the bourgeoisie, the middle class, and, of course, the mother routine. Now, as they explained that to me, this means that whatever you do wrong, it's your mother's fault. If you get schmeiced in the stock market, it's because of your mother. If your winning ticket in the fifth race never becomes official, it's because of your mother. For any trouble you can name, your mother is the one to blame. Well, I found this a very attractive idea. I became an immediate convert. It was a great comfort to me. And in fact, it gave me the 3 happiest days of my life. For 3 whole days, I wasn't responsible for anything. If something went wrong or I had a problem, I didn't have to bother doing anything about it. I just blamed my mother. It was wonderful. It was euphoria unlimited as I nestled in my Nebuchadnezzar's nirvana. Until that fateful 4th day, a serpent struck down my serenity. It came in the form of a revolutionary idea. I suddenly remembered that my mother had a mother, and if everything I do wrong is my mother's fault, whatever my mother did wrong was her mother's fault. But then her mother also had a mother. With terrible confusion, I rushed over to my friends for guidance. How can I describe what happened when I broke the news? They went into a state of shock. It was like I busted all their toys. They didn't want to play with me anymore. Now, I found out later that they knew all along that my mother had a mother, but they pretended not to, because you aren't supposed to mention it in polite society. I had made a terrible faux pas. So they made me a non-person, like I was an old Russian premier or something. They wouldn't talk to me, or they wouldn't look at me, or if they did, I got such icy stares that clearly, for me, it was a cold day at the Hot Pot. So that's why I came across the street over here. Anyway, this is a better place. It's got celebrities, contest winners. Like there's a girl who was Miss You Should Know From It of 1952 from the Stugadach, Texas. That's on the Sambachian River near the Sambachian Indian Reservation. And there's another one who was Miss Dim-Out of 1944. And she won that title because she was a glimmer girl. Her father had what at one time was the biggest Pripyatchik factory in Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania. Well, do I have to tell you what happened to the Pripyatchik business? Suffice it to say, it's not exactly a growth industry. So she came to New York. Now, when these two met, they had an immediate affinity for each other and founded Unglücks Anonymous, and they come here. Also, it's a friendly place. They give nicknames to people. Like there's a sharp-eyed fellow. They call him Louis the Laser, and started a rumor that he has ruby contact lenses. But this I don't believe. Then there's Frank. Well, actually, his name is Max, but they call him Frank, short for Frank Kuchen, and they call him an omelet because he's a mixed-up egghead. So I was talking to him one time, and we were engaged in deep discourse. Well, you know how it is. How long can you hold out? When you're involved in this kind of talk, eventually the conversation gets around to, you guessed it, epistemology. What else? At which point, he said to me, but how do you know that you know? From this puzzler, I quickly recovered. After all, I'm not so dumb, and Descartes was no bum. So I said, cogito ergo sum? Well, a couple of girls at a nearby table heard this, and one turned to the other and said, such a chauvinist, always talking Jewish. To which the other replied, that wasn't Jewish, it was Hebrew. Blinded by the brilliance of such pearls of punditry and emeralds of erudition, I finished off with this fellow and moved over to hear more. Well, it seems one of them was a social worker and was describing an interview she had had with a young man, apparently at his hospital bedside. And her friend hung on every word. The story came to a climactic conclusion with a triumphant exclamation, and then I verbalized his hostility. Her friend nearly fell off the chair as she panted. Yes, was it a nice one? But don't get me wrong about social workers. You just have to understand them. You see, just as the Catholic Church has a concept of the See of Peter, you will hear a typical social worker refer to my client, the world. And it's true, they really do have an explanation for everything. Like when Khrushchev made an ass of himself at the UN that time with the shoe and the whole thing. Well, that was because he had an unhappy childhood and was acting out. And Fidel Castro had too early toilet training. And de Gaulle, he's a big skinny reaction formation. But don't get the idea I'm opposed to psychiatry. The exact opposite is true. And as a matter of fact, I am right now working on the first practical plan to bring analysis to the masses. In this, I am collaborating with that eminent Viennese psychiatrist, Herr Dr. Wolfgang Schlockopperwand, a very prominent man in the field. We're going to use green stamps. Well, not really green stamps, ink blots. You see, whenever you make a purchase, the clerk puts an ink blot in your book. And when it's filled, you go to your family psychiatrist, give him the book just as it is. All you add is hate. So while it's obvious I've got nothing against psychiatry, I will have to admit a bit of prejudice about women. Well, but that's because of my experience with these demanding females. You know how it is. You go out with a girl a couple of times, and right away she has to have a charge account at Siegel and Cooper, a season box at the Hippodrome, a Pierce Arrow with power steering. It's very discouraging. There'll be a short intermission while you flip your disc. Oh, Wall Street 99200, Wall Street 99200. When stocks and bonds you sell or buy, we will tell you how and why. The second half of our show is brought to you by the investment firm of Knockett and Borvis, the working man's stockbroker. Attention, delegates, shop stewards. Is your union planning a strike, an organizing campaign, or a political rally? Before you spend money for meeting halls, look into our special offer to use any one of our conveniently located boardrooms absolutely free, after the market closes, of course. Have the director of your pension or welfare fund contact us for further details. We now turn our attention to that vast army without which the wheels of New York's business and finance would soon grind to a complete halt. I refer, of course, to the accountants, public accountants, private accountants, tax accountants, cost accountants. You can't make a move without them, and they're getting richer and richer. In fact, they are now so rich, they can afford to concern themselves about really important things, like worrying about their public image. Now, being practical men of means, they took decisive action and called in a motivational research outfit. Well, these fellows made the appropriate in-depth surveys, and when the results were tabulated, the client's worst fears were confirmed. The public did indeed have a low opinion of accountants, regarding them as introverted, sullen, sexless, and humorless. In fact, they were locked in a three-way tie for last place with lady wrestlers and teachers. Well, as part of the campaign to counteract this, they engaged a firm of gag writers who came up with the following joke. It's about two friends. One a typical fast-talking extrovert salesman, and the other a presumably timid, meek accountant. Now, the dashing salesman had a date that he couldn't keep because he was called out of town suddenly. He couldn't get in touch with the girl, didn't want to stand her up, so he had his friend keep the appointment. Naturally, as soon as he got back, he called in for a report. Well, the accountant was very nonchalant and merely said that they went out, had a nice time, and after he took her home, he made a beautiful journal entry. Well, upon hearing this, the salesman had a violent reaction. At first incredulous, then contemptuous, and he finished up by recommending him for therapy. Well, after the friend calmed down, the accountant delivered the punchline. He said, "Look, stupid, that shows what you know. This girl you set me up with was a voluptuous virgin, and a journal is a book of original entry." Now, following the LIFO principle, this reassuring story will be first on the agenda at the next accountants' convention. Well, you know how it is that success brings success, and the telephone company heard about this triumph and came to them with their problem. It seems that their natural enemy, the consumer, has been scoring an insidious tactical victory in their perennial war. Now, you know what happens when you make a call. You dial a number, and the phone rings at the other end. If no one answers, it continues to ring until you hang up. Then you get your dime back, right? Okay. The theory behind this is that the telephone is to talk over. And if you haven't spoken to anyone, the company in its munificent generosity doesn't charge you for the call. Well, it seems that an ungrateful public is unscrupulously abusing this generosity. They figured out how to talk to each other without answering the phone. They just use the number of times it rings as a code. Now, that's very easy to do. Let's say I tell you to wait for a call at 6 o'clock. If I let the phone ring 3 times, that means I'll be over. If I let it ring only twice, that means I won't. And after I hang up, you call me back with the same signals and we're in business. We have used the telephone facilities but haven't paid for it. Well, the company found out about this. Well, they're not so dumb. But they're also smart enough to know that there's nothing they can do about this directly. So they told the motivational people to figure out a way to make this practice unhip, to shame the public into stopping it. Well, with a client like AT&T, you know, you just don't fool around with a few gag writers. They have mobilized the entire cultural complex of the country for this campaign. For example, they're getting David Susskind to devote one of his programs on the sick society to a discussion of how this rampant immorality represents a complete breakdown of traditional values. And Jack Parr is going to cry for 5 whole minutes about the widows and orphans who were stockholders in AT&T. And Tennessee Williams is going to sum up his career with a decadent play called The Cat Who Fiddled on a Hot Tin Roof the Night the Iguana Burned in the Bedroom Below when the milk train didn't stop there because no one answered the phone. Oh, now this is a revolutionary concept in playwriting. It's the first time in the history of the theater that the title of a play is also the entire first act. And, James Baldwin is going to do a ringing, get it? A ringing indictment of the hypocrite white liberal in a searing novel called I'll Fire on Another Telephone the Next Time It's Not Answered. And Edward Albee, this is very funny. I must tell you about Edward Albee. You see, they wanted him to write a symbolic play called Who's Afraid of Don Amici? But they ran into a problem. He wouldn't answer the phone, so they had to give that up. Oh, yes. We interrupt this program for a special bulletin. The State Liquor Authority has just announced settlement of its long-standing dispute with the Playboy Club over the latter's policy of admitting only key holders. Hereafter, if you don't have a key, you can get in with a Geo card. Well, this was described as a major step forward in the joint government-industry program designed to discourage dropouts. Dropouts, stop. What are they always talking about dropouts? Actually, most of the kids in New York are very serious, dedicated students. But this can also cause a little conflict with the parents. Like the young fellow who was learning about computers. And his father was very curious about the subject. He had read so much about automation, computers, and he kept trying to get the boy to explain it to him. But the son was putting him off, saying it was too complicated, he wouldn't understand it, etc. But the father persisted until the boy broke down, and in a very condescending manner explained the binary number system to him. Well, the old man listened carefully, and when it was all over, he said, if Aristotle could only see what they did with his law of the excluded middle. And you know what? I think the old boy's got something there. We'll just close on a note of hard sell. Eradicate with Hargate because Hargate is the leader, it's the best to use. Hargate is the leader, bugs will be removed. Hargate kills just like a bug bomb or mortar. It's the best to use. Diddle-dee-boom.